Hello and welcome to the 16th Understanding Class live stream. Today we are going to be starting chapter 9 is the Precariat A Class. Today we have a lovely wee panel here with us. We've got all the way from Utrecht, the main man himself, Kyle. How's it going?
Yeah, not bad. It's a beautiful summer day.
What's the temperature like over there? Is it like
Uh,
20?
yeah, it's about maybe 22, something like that today.
Very good. So we can talk in this code so that Esri and Sophia won't know what we're talking about. Celsius is impervious to the American brain. How are you two doing?
Oh please! My watch is in Celsius now. I've been training for months to understand scientific measurements. I'll have you know. We're just
the
getting
sad
move
thing
on.
is, the sad thing is, Esri, that's true. You have actually had to do it for months to train your brain.
Yes, that's 100% correct. And everyone I talk to in the United States is like, "How could you do that? There's no way you can do that." And it's just like, yeah, you could do it. Like 15 is 59 or something. Yeah, I forget the actual pattern, but I'll get there eventually.
What is the formula? The formula is something like 24 times.
It's 5/9 times Fahrenheit plus 32, I think. Something like that.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
To memorize the pattern. I think let's see. It was
32 is 0, isn't it? 32
yeah,
is
32 is 0. That one's
and 70
easy.
is 20. So it's like what?
But these are the ways. Oh yeah, you have to do this. I would say backwards, but I think we're backwards. You have to do this. Forwards. If you're learning Fahrenheit, I guess. You're like, what the hell? 68. What is that like? 20?
Well, yeah, like my car in Canada is a US model, so it's like in miles and Fahrenheit. And like I have no idea what any of the temperatures in the climate control system are. I just like press buttons until it feels right.
Well, it feels right, and you look at the number and you say, okay, that number feels right. That's a good number. I feel like it's the way.
It's pure empiricism. That's my method.
Yeah. So
pure empiricism. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. So
no, you don't.
We're moving. It's a lot. It's
yes.
fun, though. By the time this is out, it'll be done.
Yeah, we'll be in Barcelona by the time. Welcome from Barcelona.
Yeah.
Hey, nice.
Barcelona.
Oh yeah, we're gonna work on that.
Yeah. I apologize to all our Spanish audience for offending you.
Do we have Spanish audience? Write to us in the chat.
Like, comment, and subscribe if you're offended. Email Tom and blame him.
Definitely leave comments if you're offended.
Tell Tom.
Don't leave supportive comments. No one reads supportive comments.
Let Tom O'Brien know how offended you are, and get mad at him specifically.
Yeah.
Go for the gut.
Really make it personal.
You want a nice cutting remark in the comments. Yeah.
You're making a bit of gross assumption there that we actually have an audience.
Fair. That's a fair point. We don't do this regularly enough.
There is like me, and I think there's one other. So that other is probably like the CIA. So
yeah, that's a good point.
All right. How's
CIA handler?
How's Fort Langley? How's it going?
Yeah. What temperature is it in Langley? That's what we're interested in. Here we are from the. Let me see. How do I? Can I add? I can add it. We have an extra comment here. See, I told you, Christopher Carroll. Hi from the CIA.
Hey, what up?
Yeah, I've always wanted to meet you.
Yo,
I have like a bunch of music that I lost from 10 years ago. Do you have a backup of that?
Yo, delete my nude, you fucking freak.
No, hold on. Listen to the music first. Then we'll do the nudes later. Can we put a couple exemptions in the facial recognition algorithms? Is that like a thing?
Yes. I like those t-shirts. Have you seen those t-shirts you can wear that are just designed to confuse the facial recognition?
Well, if
Ah.
I knew about them, I'd have them. So I guess not.
You have like kind of weird faces on your t-shirt. So your t-shirt looks like it's a picture of somebody with like a strange face. And so whatever thing it does, it just confuses the machine learning. And so it like recognized the t-shirt instead of you.
Nice.
Sounds like a strategy.
Sounds like a strategy. Okay, we're not revolutionary strategy. That's in the past. Now we're on to understanding class. Chapter 9. Here we go. Let's give it a go. Okay, so Esri and Sophia, I'm going to like mute you unless you're talking because there's background noise. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Okay. So, chapter 9, is the Precariat a class? Okay, I'll take the introduction then and see how we get on from there. Okay, in this chapter, we explore the problem of when a category is a class in the case of what has become to be known as the Precariat. The Precariat has its origins in discussion of the increase in economic insecurity and precariousness of employment in the 1980s and 90s. In these earlier works, it was treated mainly as a condition faced by workers, rather than as a distinct class within a class structure. This reconceptualization from precarity as a condition to the precariat as a class is much more controversial. We will interrogate the work of Guy Standing, author of The Precariat and the Precariat Charter, its most influential advocate. E.O. Wright will argue that while the precariat can be situated within class analysis, it is not useful to treat it as a distinct class in its own right. So that's the general gist of this chapter. Like how, it seems to me like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the talk of the precariat was really trendy in the left. What's the story? Like, am I right in saying that, or is it got a longer history?
I mean, there's always like discussions of different like fractions of the proletariat, maybe the lumpen, but like, yeah, precariats, this is very of its time. It's like not a lot of people talk about specifically the precariat now.
Not anymore. When I was a baby leftist in like 2015, 2016, I remember I was like, learning socialist theory and stuff, and my friend was like, "Hey, what do you think about the precariat? You think it's a class?" And I was like, "I don't know. What is it?" And they explained it, and I was like, "No, I don't think that's a class." That's basically what this chapter is in a little bit more of a elaborate way.
Yeah, I've seen it kind of like come up here and there in the sort of like broader social theory I've run into in for my job. So I wouldn't say it's completely gone as a topic of discussion, but it's definitely not like the hot thing in the way that it used to be.
Where I see it used, it is usually not considered a distinct like class faction from the proletariat. It's usually like the author's way of saying the contemporary proletariat, which I think is like maybe a more accurate view of what is being discussed there.
Yeah, it's pretty big though, like in the way that it doesn't sort of fit the criteria of class based on exploitation in the way that like Eric Olin Wright is advocated in this book, right? So I've seen it also used to just like kind of vaguely gesture in the direction of like, well, things are pretty tough these days.
Okay, so like people that are navigating rent markets instead of being properly exploited at the point of production.
Yeah. It's just like you could be downwardly mobile middle class, you could be a starving student, you could be, proletarian. There's no real distinctions drawn. It's just kind of like, yeah, capitalism is bad and people are having a tough time. It's kind of the general gist of what I get out of the discussion of it.
Yeah, I just thought I'd bring up Betteridge's law of headlines. I don't know if you guys know this one. This is like any headline that ends in a question mark can be answered by the word no. Essentially, this this is what we're going to be finding out today. What do we reckon? Oh God, where has everything gone? Present. Okay. Oh no. Present. Share screen. Excuse me. Which one? Here we go. Okay, there we go. We're back. Okay, well, let's try the next slide. Kyle, how do you feel about doing this next slide?
Sure thing. All right. Guy Standing's arguments for the precariat as a class. Standing grounds his arguments for the precariat as a class in a quite complex three-dimensional definition of class. Damn. It's like seven-dimensional chess over here. Class can be defined as being determined primarily by specific 1. Relations of production, 2. Relations of distribution, and 3. Relations to the state. From these arises a distinctive quote-unquote consciousness of desirable reforms and social policies. The explicit inclusion of relations to the state is quite distinctive here. While many class analysts see the relationship of classes to the state as an important issue, few build this into the very definition of class structures. Standing believes that a pivotal aspect of lived reality of those in the precariat centers on the increasing marginalization of many people from the rights normally associated with citizenship. It is the intersection of economic precarity with political marginality that most sharply creates a boundary dividing the precariat from the quote-unquote working class.
Yeah, what do people feel about like this dividing of the precariat away from the working class?
I mean, it seems well intentioned. The guy standing around is obviously concerned about the downward mobility of people and wanted to. I don't know if he really thinks that this precariat is a distinct class or not, but it seems like from what is presented in this chapter, there's a lot of it seems to be a lot of well-intentioned concern for people who are in such a precarious situation. And I really think the relations to the state is like a novel part of the definition of a class that I kind of like. I don't know how much I agree with it or not, but I think it's interesting. It's interesting to think about.
Well, it's always implicit if you have a theory of like a class state, but yeah. I guess as far as this is concerned, like it's one of a series of ways of understanding, why the proletariat don't look like the proletariat, like the proletariat in real life don't look like the proletariat from history books, or even in just in history, like the proletariat's always been bigger than semi-skilled infrastructure workers that have adequate representation, and I don't know, like I don't want to be too hostile to people trying to like figure out the interests of different fractions or whatever, but yeah, I don't know, like in terms of relations to the state, I especially think it's sort of by assigning this to a particular fraction of the proletariat, it's not really grappling with what's happening with democratization in general to the greater proletariat and the weakening of like democratic bodies in general in democratic societies, like the way that especially this drift is really visible in the US, the way that legislative bodies are kind of getting the shaft for executive bodies. It's so like political marginality is I think maybe a bigger topic. Why like people's relationships to politics and state have shifted in a way that I think even if you have formal union representation, like you kind of don't have that much more say in the world. Like,
no, unions now basically with few exceptions, are
With a few
basically like
exceptions.
it gets you a better contract, and that's it. Like it doesn't really mean you have a greater say in the economy.
Technically, your union money is going to fund a candidate of some kind, but like, does that really get you out of political marginality?
No, because these candidates only do like very at best they do token gestures towards your union, and that's it. And at worst, they take your money and shaft you anyway.
Yeah, and I think like it's in terms of like sort of like citizens rights, or citizens rights is what he focuses on here. It's sort of like you were saying, like it's very differentiated between different sectors of the working class, like to what extent those rights and their existence or absence is tied to precariousness. Because like you said, like it's like there's a relationship between the sort of disenfranchisement and impoverishment or immiseration of the working class, or the shrinking of, say, the well-off working class. But on the other hand, for the poorest workers, like I don't know if that's the sort of the crucial distinction that would define their condition. I assume that when he's talking about rights, he's talking about sort of, these like positive liberty like goods provided by the state to some extent, and or provided through the state, that is. And I think that as we sort of talked about in the 18th Vermeer discussion, like it's kind of a complicated topic in terms of like the relationship between dependence of the state and the working class, right? And there's some degree of overlap between the two, but I just don't think that like you can say like the healthy working class is the working class that gets the goods from the state unequivocally. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a bit where he's talking about the rights as well is where he splits we'll see it later, but he splits up the Precariat into a number of kind of subcategories, one of which is kind of like, people like, say, in certain European countries like the Roma and that, who really don't get the same rights from the state as the others do, other poor workers do.
Absolutely, sure.
Okay. Do you want to take the second slide then? Sorry.
Well, I just wanted to sort of respond to that it's not like the Roma just started existing in 2011. Like,
100%. 100%. The
counter argument, because there are these people. There's always been these people. This has always been part of the class picture that Marxists, to varying degrees, have participated in locking these people out of the historical subject. And a lot of this discussion would have been just about the lumpen at most points in Marxist history. Whatever that means to you.
Well, we're going to get to talk about it all over again, folks. Let's have a look at this next section here. Guy Standing's arguments for the Precariat as a class. Based upon these three dimensions of relations, production, distribution, and relations to the state, which I'm pretty sure is a form of distribution, but okay. I can see how there's other things to it, but like if you're going to talk about economic categories, I think it's just another type of distribution. But anyway.
So remember, it's in the classical Marxist sense, and Marxists kind of suck. So right, like anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Standing identifies 7 classes that comprise the class structure of contemporary capitalist societies. Okay, so the 7 classes. So number 1 is the elite or the plutocracy. This is a true ruling class in the classical Marxist sense. In Standing's words, they are not the 1% depicted by the Occupy movement. They are far fewer than that and exercise more power than most people appreciate. So it's not the like quantitative definition of the
Right.
1%. It is the qualitative definition of like what they say goes.
They're the shape-shifting lizard class, essentially.
Yeah. This is like your, you know, Fortune 500 CEOs and Bezoses and so on and so on. Number 2 is the salariat. So not the proletariat, the salariat.
Solarians.
Yes. This class is defined as those in stable full-time employment, some hoping to move into the elite, the majority just enjoying the trappings of their kind, with their pensions, paid holidays, benefits, often subsidized by the state, concentrated in large corporations, government agencies, and public administration, including the civil service.
So corpos, basically.
Yeah, like corpos or like what do you call them? I guess you would include what are often called like the liberal elites in in this category.
Okay,
The
so
administrators
blue
in
checks the
public
former
service. What's that?
Okay. Blue checks in the former sense, not the latter sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, the category isn't describing an elite, but it's like, yeah, it's sort of white collar in either the private or the public sector with salaries and stable forms of like benefits.
People during the pandemic that are just like, well, I'll just work from home. What's the big deal? Like,
yeah. Who also have salaries. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, my salary, yeah. My friends with salaries are the only people that were like, yeah, this is fine. Fuck it. Well, who cares?
Yes, the people who were not at risk of dying in the pandemic in enormous numbers.
Like, in any way. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Number 3, the proficients. Ooh. This combines the traditional ideas of professional and technician, but covers those with bundles of skills that they can market, earning high incomes on contract as consultants or independent own account workers. So this would be separate from the salariat in the sense that they are not salaried and they potentially earn more money, but they also don't get a lot of benefits, right? So they're just earning that contract revenue and then paying for their benefits out of pocket or pension out of pocket, that kind of thing.
Just gonna put it out there. I think this is
Mhm.
like a good. I think if you're, if you want to like, if you're a Marxist trying to live your values, proficient is probably like, shooting for the moon. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of just like make a little extra cream, and yeah, in neoclassical analysis, you're getting a rent, but fuck them, like,
yeah,
fine,
yeah,
like get that rent, like,
get your bread.
Yeah. And I like sort of in our discussion that we had previously about the petty bourgeoisie, I think these are the people that I was objecting to calling PB if they don't actually employ anyone themselves.
Yeah, that's fair.
But also, Kyle, as in like that definition of petty bourgeois would include people that wouldn't even be proficients because they would be like independent Uber workers and things like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
One question: How did he come up with the name Proficients? Like,
it's professional plus technician.
Oh wow, that's so
brilliant.
cool.
some
Wow.
kind of brilliant portmanteau.
It is a
something only an
portmanteau.
economist could come up with, I think.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah. Yes, incredible, truly. Number 4, the old quote-unquote core working class, or the proletariat. This is defined by its reliance on mass labor, reliance on wage income, absence of control or ownership of the means of production, and habituation to stable labor that corresponds to its skill. So
that is kind of a Marxy, like, that's sort of
yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything really that important about whether you are in this position and make a salary, a wage, or a piece wage, but
right.
Yeah, I think otherwise it basically makes sense to describe what used to be known as the proletariat. And then number 5, we have the precariat, which is a mystery class.
Yes.
Then we have number 6, the unemployed, another mystery class. Although I think we generally know what. I suppose these are the chronically unemployed, is what we're talking about, more so than like just the sort of floating reserve army of labor, like short-term unemployment kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, because like, could you really be a class if you're like just unemployed for like a few months?
Well, no, I think reserve army of labor is more precarious, and
Yeah.
like, if you're permanently unemployable, then you're underclass. Like,
yeah, you're underclass. Well,
how else are you gonna live? Like, what are you gonna do? It's got to come from somewhere.
I guess the unemployed are like living off of like welfare.
Well, okay, but however, comrades, let us pay attention to the definition of the lumpen precariat or underclass.
Oh, yeah, lumpen precariat. That's right. Well, if the word lumpen and precariat like themselves weren't like bad enough separately.
Standing specifies this category as, quote, a detached group of socially ill misfits living off the dregs of society.
Well, I think you know where we are on this class typology.
Seriously, the reason why I haven't put any description in for the precariat and unemployed is because it's not in the book. So
yeah, no, that's what I figured.
Yeah, I wonder how much standing actually goes into this. If I was a better podcaster, I would have certainly read Guy Standing, or probably Guy Standing, and been like, oh, well, you see, standing really actually makes more of a thing about blah, 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 blah. His use of unemployed is different than lumpen precariat.
Actually,
that's what the panelists are for. God damn it. Yeah. That's your job.
I know. Sorry, I'm moving, shit. Like,
Eric Olin Wright actually does do some of that homework for us. If we're to take him at, face value and good faith, he says that Guy Standing doesn't really do much to elaborate on any of these other classes except for the precariat. Mm-hmm. Now, Eric Olin Wright does say, well, the point isn't to, come up with a whole new class typology. The point is to defend the precariat. So, let's see if the argument that distinguishes the precariat from the working class stands, which is what Guy Standing does for most of the book.
Yeah.
So you're off the hook this time, Esri.
Okay. Do you think Olin is his middle name, and he just makes sure to say it so he doesn't get confused with Eazy-E?
Yes, 100%. Okay. Next question.
I just say, I don't particularly like I think it's Wright who's putting the brackets on the proletariat. The guy describes it all core working class. I'm not exactly sure about that, but I kind of feel like I hate when people just term the people that are the remnants of an organized working class from the past as the proletariat, and not everybody who's in the same wage relation with respect to capital. So that's just something I kind of I don't like.
Yeah, it's conceptually messy and not like methodologically sound, but it's just sort of using this category to point to a sort of like common understanding that has existed in society, and to some extent would sort of coincide, I guess, with the idea of like blue collar labor. Yeah.
It also reflects a certain amount of tension between proletariat as an analytical term in a Marxist framework that is a coherent sort of view that you can put on any, capitalist time period and get an understanding out of, versus, who like the historical subject was understood to be in the story of the 20th century, long 20th century workers movement. And, who they thought the proletariat was during that time, essentially. And so it's a conflict between, analytical reason and a sort of like nominalist, like historicist reason. And most Marxists, specifically the ones that are following Georgi Lukács and kind of consider critique to be their profession, they're really taking on this like nominal, like historicist thing as like the Marxist method, as like, more important than communism and, the ethics behind egalitarianism is this like steadfast, upholding this method. So there are going to be a lot of people who use the proletariat in this sense because, people have been calling it that for a long time. And these people are basically just like Euro conservatives with like red flags. So they care a lot more about historic usage than they do analytical usage.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just going to share the screen here. Sorry, I unshared it for a second. I was wondering how we would map these 7 classes to these guys. So what do we think?
Ooh.
I like it.
Now, dear listeners, we're looking at the 7 dwarfs all decked out in a sort of red color. I don't know if the 7 dwarfs are normally mostly red, but
they were communists, famously communist.
Yeah, well, as dwarves.
All right, Galaxy Brain take.
Disney cartoons tend to be.
Let's jump in with the Galaxy Brain take. All right.
Galaxy Brain take.
The elite is not in this picture. The elite is Snow White.
Huh.
Yeah.
What is the queen? Is the queen like the feudal aristocracy?
The evil queen? Yeah, that's like the previous class system.
Surely the elite are the grumpy. Yeah.
Well, but no, Grumpy's got a pickaxe though. He's got a union. Like.
Well, no, that's just for hitting people. We got the Solariat is happy. The Proficients is Doc. The old core working class are bashful, and then we got the Precariat are dopey. The unemployed are sneezy, and we got the lumpen proletariat as sleepy.
Well, no. The lumpen proletariat doesn't have time to sleep. In fact, if anyone's really dopey here, it's the lumpen proletariat.
Yeah, no, that's real. Who's dopey? Who's selling the dope?
I mean,
that's true.
If you can afford, if you can afford to be unemployed as a class status, you're sleepy. Like,
yeah, 100%.
I'm chilling with raccoons and bunnies.
100. If I could afford to live without working, what would I be doing? I would be snuggled up with a bunny. Yeah. I'd be snuggled up with a raccoon. I'd be snuggled up with my dog.
Yeah.
I'd be sleeping all fucking day.
But like the really rich, they're never sleepy and content. They're going to be grumpy assholes.
No, that's why it's Snow White. It's absolutely Snow White. It's like Snow White is like the e-girl Twitch streamer that all their money is going to who's running
Yeah.
society.
At the top of the aristocracy.
Yeah,
Exactly.
at the very top.
Yeah.
It's not Bezos,
Yeah.
it's not Mark
No,
Zuckerberg,
no,
it's an e-girl.
No, remember, it's only the visible people are the elites. Like, there's
That's
no one
right.
behind the curtain.
This is like an incel version of cost analysis.
That's what they do. There was actually a guy in the First International that was a hard anti-colonialist, but also was basically a proto-MRA and kept trying to do like reverse, like unity theory Marxist feminism.
Oh wow!
Where women are actually the bourgeoisie.
Oh
So like
my
that
god.
joke from Disco Elysium actually has a historical, antecedent.
That is hilarious.
Anyway, I'm putting in my vote for Bashful as the elite because it's a long-term sociological fact that class elites develop neuroses.
Would Sleepy be one then too?
I feel like
just taking too many of those sedatives.
Or narcolepsy.
okay, yeah. No, you know what? That might be the salariat actually, like because like all my friends with salaries, like
they just be napping.
they're just fucking cruising. They can just nap through the day. I don't even know when they do work. I don't know what they do. Like,
Well, they have jobs that are like nothing. They're like, I'm a consultant Jeffrey Tube analyst. Like, what is? You're just making shit up.
Excuse me. The consultants are the salariat, not the salaried. Or sorry, not the salariat. The what was it? Not the professionals. The
proficients. Yeah.
Proficients. Yes, those are the consultants.
Why do all these classes sound like aliens from what's that? StarCraft.
Oh my god.
The protons and the proficients.
Yeah, the proficients, the protons. I'm the Zerg fucking.
Oh, that's the lumpen.
Yeah, the Zerg are the lumpen.
Yeah, Zerg are the lumpen.
All right, so this is just giving us a shitty MRA class analysis.
Nice.
Maybe we could make something useful out of it.
Okay, let's after that very interesting discussion. Let's
yeah, I'm sure it was really revealing.
Let's go on and hit the next slide. Esri, how do you feel about hitting this one?
Yeah, sure, let's do it. Does the mic sound better, by the way? I hope it does.
Much better. No background noise. Is it? Which one is it?
Great. It's the Blue Snowball, signed by Mike Duncan.
Oh yeah, cool. It's world class.
You can hear the quality. All right. So, D. Standing's arguments for the precariat as a class. Standing's objective is not to provide careful, analytically rigorous definitions of each of these classes. He provides only a vague set of demarcations and rationales for some of these categories. For example, it's not at all clear from his analysis how non-managerial white-collar and credentialed employees in stable jobs in the state and private sectors should be treated. He's only really concerned with differentiating the precariat from the rest of the class structure, especially from the working class. He does this by contrasting the working class and the precariat in terms of the three dimensions of class relations. He does not give any explicit ranking to these three dimensions, but the first of these, relations of production, seems to be the most fundamental in anchoring the concept and giving the concept its name. End of slide. Yeah. Wright isn't Wright charitable. Like, couldn't we all learn a little bit from Miracle and Wright in his ability to, try to reconstruct something he doesn't even spend that much time arguing against? It's like, I don't know, man. Like,
yeah.
I don't find his arguments, like Wright's arguments, like very, like, I don't know. I feel like I'm at church a little bit, like, yeah. Like, like, I don't know. It wasn't like a challenging read. I wasn't like, oh man, I don't know. Maybe I have to revise my class analysis.
Nah, it's I don't know, man. Fucking.
Okay, babe.
What's going on? I stepped away. I had to go to the toilet for a second, and like, What's
Yes.
going on?
I don't know what to say about this shit.
Yeah, I mean, right barely even is just. I was just commenting on how, like, I don't know. Wright is very fair about presenting Guy Stanning's point of view, but kind of just he dismisses it rather quickly. And I mean, I can't. I want to flesh out his, critique of it a little bit, but there's almost so little to say. Like, you either accept that this like class fraction really does have meaningfully different, like relations of production, or not, and it's kind of hard. I don't know. Kyle, am I being fair? Like, is this like
it feels
too
like
basic?
that? It feels like Wright is kind of struggling to see exactly. Like, it seems like he's saying he doesn't even define his own terms here. Like,
Right. He's trying to be nice about it. His
Yeah.
objective is not to make any damn sense. What he's trying to do is,
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
I think the thing about when I was making the joke about the e-girl ruling society, I think the point there is not that I believe that, obviously, but that this like whole thing feels very sort of like pointing fingers at things, just sort of like, hey, that's a thing. Like, it's kind of just descriptive and like ascriptive to these different groups of like, yeah, there's like 7. I came up with a list, and am I going to define these in any depth? No. I just kind of thought it would catch on. Like, people might get interested in this sort of journalistic.
yeah. Thought it might help.
Well, I feel like when the Precariat sort of first was written, like we looked it up yesterday, it's in 2011, right? So what was going on around this time, right? And you had kind of like the death of class, quote unquote, the death of class debate in the 90s, which Wright touched on. And then you had, in the 2000s, you had Bush, and then you had the economic falling out in 2008. And so it feels like around this time, class analysis started to be in vogue again. And so people were kind of just like looking around being like, oh, shit's fucked up, but it's different than back in the early 20th century in the heyday of the socialist movement. What's different about it? I don't know. This is a class, right?
Yeah.
And that's the most charitable read I could give the Precariat. Like,
Mhm.
people just kind of look around and be like, shit's different. What's different? Well, I don't know. This is a new class, I guess.
Well, the people are grateful when they are employed instead of like, oh, my fucking boss that I totally take for granted at this job, I could get another one of.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
no,
yeah. Plus,
that
it's
is
like
different.
the Occupy movement's just been crushed, right?
Right.
So this whole thing about like not being listened to by the state is also pertinent to that moment.
Yeah. And yeah, I forget exactly where its publication comes in like the sequence of events, but people had signs about precarity and stuff in the movement. So
It's around this time. All this is kind of happening around the same time, and so this chapter really does ground this book in the time that it's published. I think that's the most charitable read I could give it. The least charitable read I could give it is that it's like those YouTube videos where it's like, oh, there's 42 genders. Based on what? Just this.
I remember seeing a Tumblr post going around saying that there were 7 sexes, and I was like, 7. So it's not 2. It's it's not 3. It's 7.
Okay.
Well,
yes. This is what I was trying to I think get at is it's kind of like a YouTube video, or like back when BuzzFeed was a thing, when they used to do lists. It's kind of how the 7 classes feel to me.
Do I need to get out the picture of the seven dwarves again and go through which one is which gender?
No, you don't. We don't. We don't
No.
need to. No. We
Okay.
also do not need to. We don't need to discuss the seven sexes because I can't even imagine what that's about.
Oh
And to
dear.
be clear, I do think there are more than 2 genders, but like to just say like it's X number.
Well, yeah. No, what's absurd is to fix it instead of to just like fall into a sea of infinite variety as the
Right.
limit like keeps going up and we approach infinity. Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Is,
And like,
That's more rational.
what?
yeah.
What is that? Is it that slime mold that had 400 genders? Was there a slime mold? Does anyone remember this story?
Godspeed, you slime mold, like vanguard of gender.
That's
Yeah.
That's
Wild.
That's woke.
That is woke.
That's
Woke.
just
Oh
woke
God.
slime mold. The fucking slime mold's watching the TikTok now. It's got 400 genders.
What is it? Are we turning into the fucking Diet Soul podcast? Okay.
Well, come on, man. Come on, man. All the money's gone. Like, you know, all the big leftist influencers. Look, you either got to go right wing or, you know, become a Twitch streamer. We got to make our pivot somewhere. Come on, let's get that spiked online money. Like, we can get the LaRouche cult money. That, you know, like, come on.
All I want to say
we
is
need to
that
cash in somehow, dude. Like, it's getting desperate here. I'm gonna move. Like, I got a wife to.
all I want to say is I want to critique the left from the left, and if that's not okay, I don't know what's your problem. Okay. Now, Esri, do you want to take the next slide? Esri has disappeared. Oh dear. Esri? Are they... What's happening? Okay, well, sure. Esri and Sophia, are ye both dead? Have they been taken out by a cartel hitman?
They've been taken out by the people who insist there are only 7 genders.
Well, they had it coming.
They're septagender fundamentalists, you know.
We'll wait for them to come back. To be back in a second here. Let's have a
look.
Let's
have a sec. Let's take a sec.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's yeah. That I don't like slagging other podcasts or stuff off, but I do find all that talking about woke. Woke is not a word that has ever been mentioned on this podcast. So I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think we have any need of it as an analytic category. We don't need to do like an Eric Olin Wright like charitable read of you know, what is woke. You know, but let's look at both sides of the argument.
I'll tell you, I was home in Ireland and I was out with some of my mates I grew up with, and some of them were like, you know, I know one of them listens to like Joe Rogan, and like he was giving out about like, you know, woke stuff, and it's like, oh my God, it's very well tailored. Like, it's getting down to just like, you know, sometimes I kind of assume all my old mates, like I'm the only one who's really online, but they're all super online probably now too, and they're just getting fed some bullshit, you know.
And it's like, it's pretty bad when like all that stuff is pretty much indistinguishable from like what Erdogan was saying in his election campaign.
Why? What was Erdogan saying?
Well, it was just he like made attacking queers one of his like campaign fundamentals, because I think he's like totally desperate to hold on to power after the earthquake. Right. And so like queer bashing was like, you know, he was going around saying like, oh, you know, if like they're all gonna turn your kids into gays and your family will be ruined and all this shit.
Putin has been saying the same stuff, like.
Oh yeah, no, but I'm just saying it's like it's all over the place, and it all kind of just sounds the same. It doesn't matter like which asshole's mouth it comes out of.
Here we go. They're back now.
Hello,
Esri, you're back.
Hello.
Oh, They're gone again. Hello.
No.
Yep.
Did you move to Spain? Is that what that was?
Yeah,
Just now.
Yeah, the internet sucked here, so we just moved to Spain really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, we took the transporter.
You took the transporter with you.
Yeah, we got a bigger transporter to send our smaller transporter with us.
That was handy. That is handy.
Yeah, it's an heirloom, you know.
Esri, how do you feel about taking the second part of that slide, this slide, or this next slide?
You know what? I think that's a fabulous idea. Distinctive relations of production. Standing writes, the precariat consists of people living through insecure jobs interspersed with periods of unemployment or labor force withdrawal and living insecurely with uncertain access to housing and public resources. Standing sees these relations of production as sharply differentiating the precariat from the proletariat. The precariat was no part of the working class or the proletariat. The latter term suggests a society consisting mostly of workers in long-term, stable, fixed-hour jobs with established routes of advancement, subject to unionization and collective agreements, with job titles their fathers and mothers would have understood, facing local employers whose names and features they were familiar with. Whereas the proletarian norm was habituation to stable labor, the precariat is being habituated to unstable labor. He characterizes this core idea of insecurity by arguing that the precariat lacks the 7 forms of labor-related security that characterize the working class following World War II. Labor market security, adequate income earning security. So let me try this again. So labor market security or adequate income earning security. 2, employment security or protection against arbitrary dismissal, regulations on hiring and firing, etc. 3, job security, the ability and opportunity to retain a niche in employment. 4, work security, protections against accidents and illness at work. 5, skill reproduction security, opportunity to gain skills through apprenticeships. 6, income security, assurance of adequate stable income. And 7, representation security, possession of a collective voice in the labor market through independent trade unions with a right to strike. The absence, wow, let me try that again. The absence of the first 5 of these forms of security are aspects in the distinctive form of relations of production of the precariat.
Yeah, like it's something that I really kind of drives me mad when I have to read stuff about by left wingers. A lot of them kind of Keynesian types who kind of think and talk like that the post World War II pact is the natural state of capitalism, like that. A lot of these things here, like that define the proletariat, are actually the things that were won post World War II in the class compromise.
Exactly. It's like how it is so profoundly stupid. It's just like, obviously, the proletariat at one point did not have any of these things, and then gained these things, and then lost these things again. It's like the idea that like the proletariat came into being after World War II is just so bizarre. I mean, it tracks with the definition that he uses for the working class or proletariat, but it's very, very questionable from any like historical standpoint.
Well, I think that's what we mean when we're like, "Lol, this is so '90s" or something. What the actual content of what we're trying to get at is that, and what we're saying when it's dated and etc. is like, this is sort of the shock of recognition, the horror of realization that, hey, we're coming out of this like cushy period that is a total anomaly and is not the normal rules of the game.
Right.
But I go further than that a bit, Esri. I'd say I don't even think it's that dated. I'd still say it's dominant. Like even on like those people who like think they are like Marx or stuff like that. Like if you look at the like the popularizers, how do you say that?
Popularizers.
Popularizers like say Richard Wolff or all the MMT people or like left-wing Democrats or left-wing like Corbynites and all that. They all talk in this way. So I think they're
really like represent the precariat against the proletariat. Like what do you saying?
No. I mean when they talk of the proletariat in these terms, you know, the working class as is defined in the old working class. I think that this way of describing it is still actually dominant. We're in the minority by say pointing out kind of theoretical stuff here.
Even the people that understand the theoretical stuff when it comes to politics, they just default to the ancient historical like way of doing things. Like,
part of it is the crushed horizons of pro-revolutionary communism. Like to them, like, well, there's no point in wanting anything more than class compromise, whether they realize it or not. That's what they're kind of fighting for, and they don't understand how that is an aberration in capitalism, not something that's like really obtainable and sustainable.
Yeah, like I like to think like, if we're going to, I feel like that, the natural state of the proletariat is to not have any of these things, and that we're heading back towards that natural state. That's the way I generally tend to think about it. I don't know if anybody else disagrees with that.
There's a good Stafford Beer diagram that points to, organizations of the bourgeoisie and the scribbling disorganization of the proletariat, which is just a much more accurate view than, one party per class, right? And, so each class gets its party and, okay, the ruling class has its institutions, all right, the working class has its permanent institutions. Yeah,
good luck with that.
We have a lot more sort of like we have a lot more sort of like proletarian goblin mode in terms of organization than we have this like soccer pitch, team A, red team versus blue team parallelism.
Proletarian goblin mode, like it, Kyle. Sophia, do you want to take the next slide then? Continuing on.
Guy Standing's arguments for the precariat as a class. Distinctive relations of distribution. Income, Standing notes, comes in a wide variety of forms. Own account production, income from production or selling to a market, money wages, enterprise non-wage benefits, community and solidarity benefits, state benefits, and income from financial and other assets. The distinctive characteristic of the precariat is that it lacks access to all non-money wage sources of income. During the 20th century, the trend was away from money wages, with a rising share of social income coming from enterprise and state benefits. What distinguishes the precariat is the opposite trend, with sources of income other than wages virtually disappearing. For Wright, the critical issue here is the increased vulnerability people face when their material standing of living comes entirely from money wages. The standard of living of the working class remains underwritten by forms of income other than money wages, even though these may be declining in the era of austerity. For the precariat, these benefits have largely disappeared. The combination of employment instability and income vulnerability defines the economic precarity of the precariat.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know about this, because the thing is, like, even if you are a worker who is not in steady employment, and you don't have like a regular benefits package, I wouldn't say it's the case that like you have virtually no sources of income other than wages, in the sense that like the state doesn't provide anything to you, right? Because it's like, well, yeah, but like the roads are still getting paved. Like depending on the country you're living in, you might still have access to some form of public health insurance, which isn't tied to your workplace, even though it's probably pretty shitty and it's not as good as what, a worker who has insurance through their workplace would get. Um, it, it just doesn't seem quite right to me that this is the case. It's like the value of that package may have decreased to a considerable extent, but I just don't think it is like virtually disappearing. I don't think it's quite that extreme in most places, although it probably is in some.
Yeah, we just have a comment in the chat here from Anna Kitty saying, also, I feel as if the family unit is taking the place of the state support network much more.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely like one of the social engineering goals of neoliberalism that was successful, right? Like
that's
there is no such thing as society, right? There are only individuals and families, is the Margaret Thatcher quote, and that's exactly what the point is, to make people dependent on their families.
Yeah, that's a general trend. And people that negotiated their contracts, in the fucking 1950s, yeah, their lives look a lot different.
Right. Sophia, do you want to try the next slide then as well? Try the distinctive relations to the state.
Sure. Guy Standing's arguments for the Precariat as a class to distinctive relations to the state. Standing builds his analysis around the contrast between citizens and denizens. Citizens are people... Excuse me? Sorry, 1 second. Citizens are people with full rights granted by the state. Denizens are mere residents who live under the jurisdiction of the state, but with much more limited rights. Traditionally, non-citizen migrants were denizens in this sense. They had permission to live somewhere, but with a much more limited set of politically guaranteed rights. This condition has now been extended to a significant number of people who formally remain citizens. In contrast, for the working class, these rights remain largely intact. While some segments of the working class may share some of these characteristics, taken together they constitute the Precariat as a distinct class according to Standing. This does not mean there are no divisions within the Precariat. In the second decade of the 21st century, Standing argues the Precariat in the developed capitalist world is internally divided into three main subcategories. Those who were previously firmly within a working class, but who have been marginalized by the trajectory of capitalist development. Those who were traditionally considered denizens, migrants, Roma, ethnic minorities, asylum seekers, some of the disabled, and a growing number of ex-cons. And lastly, the dynamic core of the Precariat, consisting of the educated, plunge into a precariat existence after being promised the opposite, a bright career of development and satisfaction. Most are in their 20s and 30s, many drifting out of the salariat existence are joining them. All three segments experience a deep sense of deprivation, but the focus of this is different in each case. The first part experiences it relative to a recent or imagined past. The second, relative to an absent present, an absent home. And the third relates to a feeling of having no future. These differences generate serious divisions that undermine the capacity of the Precariat to act collectively as a class. Standing thinks the Precariat is divided to such an extent that one could describe it as a class at war with itself. Yet, in spite of this, he believes that it has the potential to become a dangerous class, much more capable of the working class of challenging much more capable than the working class of challenging the mainstream political agendas of the 20th century, the neoliberalism of the mainstream right, and the laborism of social democracy.
So, what do we think about this distinction between citizens and denizens with respect to the Precariat?
I think that distinction, like by itself, is pretty useful because there is this weird bait and switch with universal suffrage always in bourgeois states that should be kind of like, if you're really thinking about all people, the set of all people in the United States, like, you should mean all, like, and so, in terms of political rights, that's just not how it works. So I think it is like an important kind of distinction. But I guess I disagree with the whole point of bringing it up. Is that like I don't know that it has a lot to do with employment standing necessarily. Like citizenship is a weird, it certainly has a huge impact on economic market segmentation, but it is a non-economic variable essentially. Like it's a political kind of conferment. Like you could just be born in the right place and have it by law.
What's really strange about this segment is that there's a conflation of legal reality versus feeling alienated by the political process, right? So for category 1 and category 3, people formerly within a working class and the educated who feel they have no future and who are downwardly mobile, based on the information given to us, they still have the same political rights as a citizen, right? Like, assuming that they were born here, they can vote, they have the same, like, legal protections.
Yeah, but they're too smart.
But to compare that to asylum seekers, migrants, Roma, the disabled, even the disabled, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's not.
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really make much sense to me.
You see, these are part of the new dangerous class, which here doesn't mean lumpen, which sometimes it does, but I guess in this case it doesn't. But they have different interests and are actually set against each other, but they're part of the same class. Okay.
Right. It doesn't
very
make too
strange.
Much, and honestly, like I think, if we look at, say, Roma, ethnic minorities, asylum seekers who are considered denizens, like, that seems to be something that is like a very, like a, nearly like a static constant in capitalism, as opposed to, it's not like these Roma or, Irish travelers or take your pick ethnic minority asylum seekers. Like it's suddenly a new thing that they're in the Precariat or they've changed, there's a change in their status. If anything,
this is a way for number 3 to discuss their like loss in status, essentially. Is to compare themselves to number 1, people that would have had a more comfortable working class existence in like the the Springsteen days or something, and now it's not like that. Or 2, like this is in a long revolutionary intellectual tradition, being like, we're just like slaves, man. We're the wretched of the earth right now because I can't find a job. Being a I don't know, professor of like rectal literature in the 1940s, like I don't know, like that's it's very strange. I keep wanting to say it's of its time. I feel like a fucking broken record.
But it is. It's painfully like 2010s.
I want to say it reflects this like moment in history where the left wasn't developed and consistent and analytical, But now where I see where things are developing, you know, like 15 years later or whatever, like I understand the gulf that's always going to exist in like, you know, what's hot in theory or something versus something that would be useful. And, you know, the real, like, just the most dismissive I can be is that, like, I think Gilles Deleuze said that it's the philosopher is like a friend to the concept, but like in a sense, like in the sense that the word is the death of the thing. The philosopher that really likes to create new words is the enemy of the concept. It's like they're trying to pop a concept, but they actually pop as a word, and the word is a brand, and the brand gets spread around, and it actually means different things to different people. The way precariat was used was never consistent among people that used it, and it was sort of used to like differentiate themselves from the proletariat, but also to position themselves as, you know, either part of this underclass or kind of like the proletariat that is locked out of a good proletarian life.
Like I think like the precariat, well, it's supposed to be a noun. In fact, was actually used as an adjective. I don't know, you know, like it was like it was more like, you know, like it was to just do it was literally just, you know, precarity or whatever. Like it was never
Okay.
You know what I mean? It was never really, even as people would say, oh, the precariat, it's just, that just meant, oh, some people who are kind of in a precarious situation. And little more than that, I think, as we can see from how things are kind of clumsily lumped together here. But what I did like in the last paragraph was that I do think that these movements of the parts of the working class into, you know, worse economic relations, does pose a challenge to the mainstream political agendas. I do think that is true, but you know, how that will shape up, we'll see. But I think that definitely will you know that material trend will have a political impact.
I guess it's telling that, like, I don't know if it's the greatest longing, but the only like sensible institutional response to the powerlessness of precarity is some kind of radical union movement that tries to not exclude people from the proletariat. I don't know, like, so in that respect, it's so hard for me to put down this, like, not that, you know, there aren't other worthwhile forms of activism, but most of those don't form something that's capable of like tackling this problem or tackling the problem that it wants. Even the most like radical stuff, like, you know, in the United States, the sort of bureaucratic layer it leaves behind is totally unaccountable, and you know, you end up with more theory like this, like, so
right. Yeah, we've yet to see anything politically promising, but it'll still see political effects.
Even the union efforts are, you know, Chris Smalls, who seems to be a good union organizer in the United States when it's almost impossible. You know, there's all this, like, there's been a, you know, bad press run recently. And of course, I'm sure there's, you know, some yellow journalistic aspects to this, you know, someone running a hit job for Bezos. But on the other hand, you know, I believe in the contemporary media environment, you know, being a labor hero might go to your head pretty quick. Like,
what we need to discuss, though, is Chomsky going to private meals with Jeffrey Epstein and Woody Allen. Man. Like, oh my good Jesus.
Do you mean to tell me that Chomsky Foucault was pedo versus pedo the whole time? The whole time.
God. Oh no. Man. Oh man.
It's like
true.
Left intellectuals just cut it out.
Yes.
Yeah. It's pretty sad.
It's kind of shocking. Yeah, I'm shocked. I genuinely am shocked.
Yeah,
no, he doesn't strike me as the kind of person who, you know, he's like your wholesome grandfather. Like I never would have guessed.
He's like a big free speech guy, I guess, and like, you know,
that's always a bad sign.
I don't know, like,
I mean, free speech is important, but not the bastardized version that.
Yeah,
is often.
That's the problem. Like, you know, he didn't, like, you can, you should respond to different intellectual climates in different ways, and like,
Right. Not the 60s anymore, my guy.
yeah, when J.K. Rowling was going to be censored somewhere, like, Chomsky put his name down to make sure she could like be represented because of free speech. Things like this, like when the political climate gets different, like people that were sort of paragons start looking more and more shady. Like,
is that really all it is, though?
Yeah,
Right.
I think the thing about Chomsky that was always like a bit like off-putting was just the guru status he had, and like his, just like sort of the way that he carried himself as a public intellectual, as somebody who's like just sort of right by nature of being Noam Chomsky. And that thing is kind of a little bit like, I guess something that lumps him in with these like high-powered pedophiles that were connected to Epstein, in the sense of just having that ego and that status. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like at minimum, this guy was willing to pal around with Epstein after after like an early conviction. When asked about it, he was basically like, "Well, he served his time."
Like seriously, like that's like the dumbest fucking line of all time. Like,
I mean,
would he make the same thing about hanging around a Klansman? Like hanging around.
Like, if you didn't know, it would be one thing. Like, man, I don't know. I was just going to dinner with.
But he's going to dinner like with Woody Allen. With Woody fucking Allen.
Yeah. What is?
No. This is the.
Your whole point was to talk to these fucking freaks.
Man, I used to be such a big Woody Allen fan. I mean, I was like, I watched every film. I knew every joke. I fucking loved Woody Allen. And it took a while for like it took me like a while. I watched like those documentaries, and then you're just like, oh, now I can't look at it. I can't see anything of it. Right. And it's like, but I don't know Woody Allen. I'm not actually, even when I was a fan, I wasn't
friends with him.
Yeah, somebody wasn't saying to me, "Do you want to come to visit Woody Allen?" And I'd be like, even then when I was a big fan, I'd be like, "Oh, I don't know, like Woody's a bit of a, like," and Chomsky's like going there with a convicted pedo. I mean, like, oh my god, it is, it's so bad. I just think it's fucking terrible.
So anyway, I think all this to say, like, left intellectual culture is not all right. And maybe like this has to do with why the Precariat was a thing. Like there's a vibe that it has, and it kind of lets intellectuals lump themselves in with two groups of people that are frankly more marginal. Like,
yeah. Well, because the thing is like, okay, so like the folks, the people who are like these download. Like, what was the description in the previous slide there, Tom? Was these downwardly mobile, the so-called dynamic core of the Precariat, plunged into a precariat existence after being promised the opposite, a bright career of development and satisfaction, 20s to 30s, many drifting out of this salariat existence or joining them. Like
that's like the IFC, like target market. Like, that's not class.
Yeah, and like this like group of people, it's like, okay, definitely. Was at this time, was I one of these people? Yeah, absolutely, I was.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it sucked. It was awful. I'm still like, I'll never, compared to other generations of people, I'm never going to recover economically from the period of time that this is describing, right? in addition to being disabled and so on and so on. But like it is, I still have generational wealth, like it's not a lot, but I do have it, and it's very, 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 very different from group 2, and to a large extent group 1 as well. And
I'm right there with you in
that
this.
makes a big difference.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's just old school class stuff. That's just like normal property. You don't have to like be real fancy about it. And is like, okay, so is precariat another way to, hide generational wealth? Like, I also have a little bit of generational wealth. It's like, I'm like too. That's like, and if you really nose around the left, you're gonna find a lot of generational wealth. Just any like
Right,
prominent subcultural like group is gonna have that. Like, it's just the way it is. The right's the same way. Like, so yeah. Sometimes fancy new class analysis makes me wonder if they're just sort of laundering economic baggage in a way.
Well, I think the thing is, like, okay, honestly, it's clear in the wake of the 2007-8 crisis that people like us were politically radicalized by being thrown into more precarious economic situation and seeing like the world structures around us that we were brought up to believe in, like exposed as lies in ways that were very like tangible and material to us, right? But like,
well, then what do we do?
That doesn't make us a new class, really, right?
Right. We like acted out kind of like councilism without jobs, right? And then we formed Jacobin, and then when that and we ran a candidate, and then when that didn't work, we formed a bunch of cults and internet silos.
Right.
Like that doesn't feel very dangerous. It feels very tame.
When we were mentioning Occupy Wall Street earlier and what year it was in, just so I could check, I looked at the wiki and I thought the first sentence was extremely funny. Occupy Wall Street was a 59-day left-wing populist movement.
59 days.
Well,
a 59-day.
Napoleon did 100, and we couldn't even do that. We were only 59. Damn.
We didn't get to do the dance when we beat the commune.
We didn't even get to 69.
Whatever. Occupy Oakland. Occupy Oakland was more hardcore. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be that person, but shit just kept going there for like a year. Like,
yeah, it was. I
don't know if it was like a permanent occupation, but that article is Occupy Wall Street. How long did the initial camp last for?
Sure.
In defense of my comrades in the movement. I feel like our reaction towards Occupy has spawned something, honestly, like just sort of reflecting over my political heritage. Like, I think a lot of the return of like totalitarianism is some frustration with like how things like the like anti-globalization movement and Occupy went, and being like, well, you can't beat them, join them, in a sense. And I really feel like something is lost by the transition from one to the other. There's a part of me that almost misses the heady days of this kind of autonomy.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a lot in like covering like neither vertical nor horizontal, the Nunes book, right? And it's kind of all about this question. And I think the thing is that when you have this turn towards like resurrecting Leninism, like the cult shit, trying to do the neo-Kautskyist stuff, all these kind of party efforts, it's very much like looking at the numbers of the mass political movements that existed in the past, seeing those as successes, and then trying to emulate the form without any core that would enable them to succeed, right? Like it is very much like the fundamental sort of like mass base of a mass party did not exist, and these groups tried to sort of conjure it into existence as a response to the failures of the anti-globalization movement, of the Occupy movement, but fundamentally, like, the problems that underlie those periods were still there and couldn't be magicked away. And so yeah, I don't know. It I understand where the reaction comes from, but like swinging in the opposite direction and emulating past, like, I don't know if you'd call them successes, but at least like notable moments, um, without the same conditions existing, it, it does feel like a very knee-jerk reflex. And like I could, at the time, I never involved myself with these groups very much, but I could kind of like get the impulse of like, I was never like hostile to the Occupy movement, but I did feel like it wasn't very well organized. It wasn't very well able to adapt to situations. And trying something different seemed like a good idea. And using Marxist theory seemed like a good idea. But I don't know if I was ever really on board with like, and therefore we must be neo-Kautskyist, or and therefore we must be neo-Leninists. Like, it's just, I didn't see that as the answer, but it did seem like it was sort of moving in a direction that was promising.
Yeah, what I got out of, so-called neo-Kautskyism was this sense that we do need some sort of institutional legacy if the proletariat's going to stand a chance. But what kind of institutional legacy? Is it going to be a political one, or does there need to be some innovation on economic form when the conditions are right in a life where economics is not in your political control? That's not how that works. Like you have to have like a respect for.
Well, yeah, but that's like the most Leninist thing, right? Is to be like,
yeah, of course.
Actually, the economics don't matter. We will just do it by political fiat.
Out of will, because Lenin invents, a current that is better used in its right-wing capitalist management variant. Like, it just is. Like, it's more adapted to the purpose. The one-party state, the political legacy of Lenin. Like,
that's why all those neocons are all extras.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, we go on. We take the next slide. Oh, let me have a go at this one. The precariats, just mute. Sorry. The precariat's place in class analysis. There is little doubt that precariousness along a number of dimensions has increased as a condition of life in developed capitalist countries. The question remains how this phenomenon should be understood conceptually. Standing refers to the precariat as a class in the making, in deference to the fact that it does not yet act as a unified collective actor. It is not yet a class for itself, in the traditional Marxist terms. Nevertheless, he argues it is a distinct class location in terms of its structural location within the class structure of capitalism, differentiated from the working class and the other classes in his inventory. He acknowledges overlap between the precariat and parts of the working class, if these conditions are taken one by one. But if it is taken as a whole, these characteristics generate a real boundary of demarcation. Standing is dismissive of scholars, in particular Marxists, who disagree that the precariat is a class. The question is whether or not sharing this set of socio-economic characteristics elaborated by Standing is sufficient to describe a social category as a class. What precisely are the criteria by which we can answer this question?
Well, and it's barely even a social category. It's more like a political conjuncture, right? like, oh, you've got these three groups, they're disenfranchised, and maybe they could get together and do something. Is that really a social category? It seems like, just sort of a moment in history.
It just seems like there was like people were looking around after Occupy and being like, something's different. And Guy Standing was just like, well, it's a class. This is a different class.
Well, I don't know. Think about how like the relation of work to Occupy. Get a job, right? It's not a classical workers movement. This is what I don't know. Again, like if you're familiar with Marxist theory, there's a whole body of literature from like the 30s like onward that's like cumulative within Marxism, where it's hard to deny that the historical anarchists had a point about the way that class structure was going to shake out, and so you need a more expansive view of class interest than the nationalist one that's going to form up, where the workers are the defender of the nation. I think we know where that goes.
Well, yeah, but also isn't that kind of the logical outcome of this analysis, right? Like, we need to reinforce national citizenship rights in conjunction with employment security. Like, does seem kind of like a chauvinistic workers movement would be the logical objective of this group.
Yeah, 100%. And like, it nearly feels like to me that like, you can imagine him thinking like, oh yeah, let's lump. What's the previous slide here where we have, the three different slices of the precariat? It's like, let's lump like the educated people who now are working in Starbucks or struggling to get a job in Starbucks in with like the Roma and the asylum seekers, and like that'll really piss them off. And then if they think about themselves like that, then we can like organize them to like defend, get those national kind of ideas of citizenship. I really feel like putting like, in Europe, like Roma or travelers are like, they're treated so badly. It's like even like versus unemployed people, they're treated badly. You could be a working Roma and be treated worse than like an unemployed like English person. So it's like, it does strike me, like you're saying, Kyle, as a really like just very chauvinistic.
It reminds me of when the American like revolutionaries would talk about being taxed and compare themselves to slaves.
Yeah, absolutely,
100%. A fine like revolutionary tradition.
Right. It's nearly like to associate like you with your PhD in like whatever weird branch of philosophy who can't get a job, and like that you are put in contradistinction with the Roma person, that it's like going to be politically motivating to you, and like it's nearly done as a shock therapy to those people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if it's supposed to be shock territory. I think it's supposed to resonate with their sense that they have been that they were promised the world and haven't been given the world, and therefore they've had something material taken from them, and that's not actually the case. They were just sort of like ideologically misled about how things were going to shake out. Like, and the materiality of the situation is like extremely variable. Like, it doesn't actually like. One thing I will say is that a lot of the like Starbucks organizers are these kinds of people, but once they go to work at Starbucks, no matter how like cringe and mumblecore you might find their background, like unless we're going to be like hard Stalinists that class is assigned at birth and it's like genetic.
Assigned prole at birth.
Yeah, assigned prole at birth. I mean, that is how Stalinism works. Like, your class origin was your like sort of class essence, and it was unchangeable, and it's biology, not hate. Like, essentially. So once that person gives up on being a professor of 19th century rectal literature, and decide just to serve coffee and do a podcast for the rest of their life. Where are they on the class ladder? Like, does is it relations of production or not? Because if you're a service worker, I think you're a proletarian, and especially if you start like unionizing in that position. So unionizing does come from people who have like like some of the union movements have been in like coffee shops and shit like that. The other place you see union movements are in these Amazon warehouses. That is in section 1 of the Precariat, I suppose, to the extent that we're going to grant the premise that people working in a warehouse under precarious conditions, that they get like some benefits. Like if we can grant that this is like a type of, I don't know, some new thing instead of reshoring contemporary capitalist working conditions, then if we can get behind that, then we can say something like the categories 1 and 3 have been sort of vanguards of unionization. Okay. And then in 2, people that don't have like recognized national status, and like ethnic minorities have like, I would say ethnic minorities excluding like the Roma, because the Roma don't really do nationalism because they don't want to lose their, more clan tribal identities. So they don't like, it doesn't really work for them, but there is a bunch of sort of ethnic nationalist movements like that are, essentially trying to politically devolve their countries. There is sort of like a sense to what he's saying in that these will be the active sectors, forgive me, of the proletariat, right? Coming next. And, also like, I said all that without even really mentioning the George Floyd rebellion in the United States, like, so there is like some sense that like these are the sectors that you're going to see like political activity from in an emancipatory capacity, and probably could be extended beyond that.
It feels like this literature, this book is a harbinger of what's to come, but it's just so wrong in a sense. It's so off, but it's pointing towards something that's different about the shape that rebellion is going to take in the 21st century. It's not quite, in a developed capitalist world, it's not quite the same as like muscle guy with hammer in a factory. It is the barista organizing the union. It is the Amazon warehouse worker organizing the union. It is, ethnic and national minorities standing up to oppression and violence.
No.
Not even necessarily just in the economic sphere, but just in general.
Yeah.
No, it's Elon Musk.
Political dimension of denizen versus citizen, and like, but that's always a part of lumpenization as well.
It's the pieces are all there. The guy standing is just not putting them together correctly.
The final piece. Elon Musk. Elon Musk buys Twitter.
Read through Wright's eyes. Like,
shit,
I think that's like as good as I can do. Is that he is pointing to some sectors that are going to pop off. And I mean, if you're looking on the right, sector 1, we used to be a proper country, kind of people like that. They're not all petty bourgeois like shopkeepers or something. Some of them are. Some of them are.
Can you hear me, Ezra and Sophie?
People that would have been working class, like people that would have, probably, voted Labor, but ended up voting Tory, like that kind of thing.
People who think Disney is the devil.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but the working class variant, the compact magazine wet dream.
No, those people exist, actually, for sure.
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Look, I just want healthcare. It's okay if we do evangelical.
They can't hear us.
All right. Sorry, Kyle. I was wondering. Esri and Sophia. You can't hear us. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because I was going mad. Like I was probably have destroyed all their talk. Then with me shouting hello.
Oh no, yeah.
What I'll do is I'll kick them out, and then they'll probably
Yeah,
come back in.
I hope so. Yeah. Yeah, they're making good points, but we just couldn't talk to them.
I was just about to say as well is that like we have like now the kind of the things are falling into place. We have Elon Musk. He's bought Twitter. You
Yeah.
know, so we have these revolutionary, the final revolutionary kind of key that's going to bring us all the way towards total emancipation and the destruction of alienated labor.
Yeah,
What do you reckon?
I mean, yeah, I like obviously I think Elon, the angry many times dad and husband, living in his fraudulent mini house for a little while, owning Twitter, destroying the entire corporation, and continuing to make a bunch of fake products, is definitely the vanguard that we need in this time. Russell Brand, Elon alliance clearly will
Russell
save
Brand.
us.
Oh my god. I don't know what's Russell Brand up to these days.
He's gone off the deep end.
Which way?
He's become. I think he's bought into a lot of like right wing conspiracy theories. Yeah.
Like, is he gone down the COVID was a fake and all this stuff?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Oh god, hilarious.
Yeah. Well, he'll always have a home on Twitter, I guess, with views like that. So
yeah,
as long as Twitter exists. But I think this, like, yeah, I just come back to the idea that what Standing is describing is really just a political situation at the time he was writing. Like it's kind of. Can you hear us now, Ezra and Sophie?
Yeah, we had a problem on our end.
Yeah. Oh yeah, cool. Okay.
Good luck cutting around that, Tom.
Yeah, because it's going to be me shouting on top of you, saying hello. Because I tried trying to talk. It's like, hello, can you hear me? It's great.
Yeah, we were like, why aren't they talking to us? And then at some point, I was like, oh, those circles are moving.
Yes. Yeah. So I just think, like, in response to sort of what you were saying, like, I really do feel like Standing is just sort of describing a political situation, and the categories he's describing are really not that novel. Like, if you kind of think about them in the sort of traditional sense of, like, okay, you got the workers, the proles, right? You got the disenfranchised, the marginalized, the excluded, the denizens, and you've got like the radicalized students, right? Like the students who learned a bunch of radical stuff and then couldn't get a job, or they aspired to a social status that would come with their education and they couldn't get it. These have often been sort of volatile social elements that can cause change, and I just think he's more identifying like a particular political situation that could go on to cause changes and disruptions, more so than he's describing anything like a class.
Right. I think that's a kind of a logical place to drop it, because next slide we're going to get into like how do we define what a class is and do they meet the criteria and all that. And like, if we go any further, we still have like about 6 or 7 slides. So it's probably best we come back another day to finish that off. What do people think?
Yeah, seems fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
It'll be a short one, probably. Well, I say that, by short, we say 6 slides. So we'll do that in an hour, and it's always 2 hours.
Well, yeah.
That's how we
We'll be
roll.
talking about this one time where we forgot our name, at a car after taking 2 dodgy pills or something.
Yeah.
That was when we were truly radical.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is true. It's been
Now
too
we're
long.
reviewing this.
When that one time when Tom lost any sense of permanence of reality.
Yeah. Not
yeah.
knowing who you are yourself. Now that is an interesting one. That's an interesting feeling. Not knowing who you are. Yeah, that's pretty wild. So let's thank the chat. We had Alex Marquez, Christopher Carroll all the way from the CIA, and we've had Anarchiddy from Greece. A quiet day in the chat today.
That's Anarchiddy. Anarchiddy. That's probably based on the character from The Good Place.
What's The Good Place?
The Good Place is a network television sitcom about like ethics and like analytical ethics and philosophy and stuff. It's actually like somehow is really good. Yeah.
I used it to teach ethics for a year.
Oh yeah. You did the trolley problem episode?
I didn't. I was like,
because
look. I was.
Oh yeah.
Well, I was like, look, y'all. Like, we've been going through season 1, and season 1 is pretty decent. Oh, the CIA is gonna go watch Eurovision.
Yeah, the CIA has left the
really,
chat.
Truly woke.
Seriously,
all right,
I
enjoy.
don't know. Yeah, the Eurovision. I could not do that to myself. It's a long time since I watched Eurovision.
I don't know. Maybe I'll watch it.
It's such like, what is the story with the Eurovision? It's basically like the Imperial Vision, it should be called. Like Australia are in the fucking Eurovision. It's basically just for white countries.
Yeah, I mean, just look at them. Yeah.
Like Israel is in it. Israel's not in Europe. Israel and Australia. Are New Zealand in it? Like
New Zealand, I don't think rates high enough to be in Eurovision, but they have like a sort of proxy interest in Australia's bid. Yeah.
So let's have a look. Like, is Armenia in Europe? I suppose it is in Europe. Some of these are. It's hard to tell what's Europe and what's like what is Asia really.
Hasn't it always been? It's just a social. Europe is a social construct.
Right. They try and say it's like the Ural Mountains, but it's like it's fucking arbitrary. But like, there's a North African country in it as well. Oh, weird. It's really strange. I don't know how they do it. Morocco was in it only once in 1980, and then they got kicked out. Fuck's sake.
Wow.
Where else? Other countries. Algeria are eligible. Egypt is eligible, but have never done so.
They've never done it.
Jordan, Lebanon, Libya, Tunisia, and the Vatican City are eligible. Fuck's sake.
Well, it was eligible, but not
Vatican City. When are you joining?
Yeah, come on, Vatican City.
It says the Europe, whoever that run it, they said we are open and always looking for new elements in each Eurovision Song Contest. However, on the 3rd of June 2015, the EBU denied that China would participate as a guest or a full participant. Oh dear!
Wow, China closer to Europe than Australia, but somehow denied.
Right, Kazakhstan.
Raises questions.
Kazakhstan were allowed in the Junior Eurovision Song Contest. There you go. So Kazakhstan, yes. China, no. Qatar, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm learning.
So
learning a lot.
Very weird. But like it doesn't, like Australia are in it, but it doesn't say Australia. Oh yeah, Australia debuted in 2015. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, they're in it this year.
Wild stuff. Okay, let's go offline and we'll see everybody next time. Hopefully not too far in the distant future.
Yeah.
Bye now.
Good night.